A guy named Ryan is ignoring messages from someone named Rabbit, but sooner or later he will have to respond. Ryan has just arrived in Latin America, but he doesn't speak either Spanish or Portuguese. Fortunately, Ryan was already being awaited at the airport. On the way, the driver handed Ryan a letter from his longtime acquaintance Jack, who couldn't meet him personally due to work. But Jack left the lock code for Ryan. The driver helped Ryan with his luggage. For a while, he would stay in a luxurious cottage. The interior was no less opulent. Ryan looked around and prepared dinner. In the evening, Jack finally arrived. The guys hugged. They once studied together in culinary school and hadn't seen each other in 12 years. This house belongs to the agency Jack works for. A dinner party for wealthy guests will soon take place here. Jack often cooks for rich people who always demand something extraordinary. Ryan also hopes to get a job as a chef. He's not used to waking up early in the morning, but Jack woke him up, and they went for a run together. Ryan was surprised to see that his friend drives an old, inconspicuous car. Jack explained that in third world countries it was best not to stand out. The guys stopped at an outdoor cafe to have breakfast. Jack asked Ryan about his life. Ryan replied that he's single and lives alone. Jack said he would also like to have such a free life. He earns well, but it seems something weighs on him. A cute girl named Alice, an acquaintance of Jack's, joined their table. The girl shared that she had finally saved enough money and quit her job. Now Alice can travel as she had always dreamed. When Alice asked the guys who the better cook was, they suggested she find out and invited her to the cottage. There, the guys prepared 2 dishes for Alice. Ryan continued to ignore incoming calls. Alice liked Ryan's dish more. Ryan always knew he had talent, he just never had any luck in life. All night the group had fun, swimming in the pool and drinking. Eventually Alice left with Jack, wishing Ryan a good night. In the morning, Ryan received threatening messages from creditors who already knew he had left the country. Jack, who had already driven Alice to her hotel, knows nothing about his old friend's financial situation. Jack has to go to work, so Ryan is left alone in the house until the evening. Since Jack didn't close his laptop before leaving, Ryan managed to access his online bank and saw that Jack had a tidy sum in his account. In the evening when Jack returned, they sat by the pool, smoking and chatting. Jack looked tired, saying how fed up he was with everything. The next morning, Ryan discovered that Jack had voluntarily passed away. Ryan was so shocked that he didn't even call for help. Ryan couldn't understand why Jack, having such an amount in his account, didn't want to live. What was he missing? A chilling idea came to Ryan, to make sure no one knew what happened here and to impersonate Jack, stealing his life. Ryan called the bank and, pretending to be Jack, said that he had forgotten his username and password due to a car accident. But in order to recover the data, Ryan would have to come to the bank branch with a proof of identity. Later, Ryan searched the internet on how to make a fake British driver's license. Ryan also intended to book a ticket to London when suddenly the creditors sent him a photo of his mother. Ryan asked for a little more time. At night, Ryan dragged lifeless Jack to the lake, where he left him. The water would hide his secret. The next day, using Jack's documents, Ryan continued to restore access to all his data. The creditors in turn continued to threaten Ryan. He had no choice but to call his friend Kevin and ask to borrow money. Ryan promised to pay back 3 times the amount in a few days. Kevin thought Ryan had gotten involved in gambling and hung up. Near the cottage, Ryan found a parked car. Inside the house, Ryan was greeted by Imogene and Maurice, who mistook him for Jack. Ryan played along. Imogene inquired if the groceries had been chosen and the menu prepared for the upcoming dinner. Ryan replied that almost everything was ready. His only concern now was whether he could get an advance payment for his work. Jack was supposed to receive £300,000. Imogene has been working with Jack for a long time, even though she's never seen him in person. But she had no reason to distrust him, so she easily agreed to transfer £50,000 in advance. This allowed Ryan to pay off his creditors. Afterward, he subtly questioned Imogene about the upcoming dinner. It turned out that the dinner would be for 5 people, and there should be 4 courses. Imogene was shocked to realize that Jack didn't have anything ready yet. The dinner was the next day, and the guests were very picky. Ryan assured that everything would be top-notch. Imogene and Maurice drove Ryan to a church and said it was too late today, so Ryan and Maurice would return tomorrow for the meat. 2 different samples were needed because one might not be suitable. Ryan didn't immediately understand that they were talking about people. He said he couldn't do it. Imogene didn't understand the problem since Jack had been doing this for a long time. One mediocre dish could ruin the agency's reputation. Ryan didn't sleep all night, trying to make sense of it. Imogene and Maurice also stayed overnight in the cottage. Now Ryan wants only one thing, to escape from here, but Imogene keeps her eyes on him. She reminded him that their guests pay $1.5 million for such a dinner. On average, The agency catches 75 people a year and makes over $100 million in net profit. 10% goes to charity. In the morning, Maurice woke Jack up and said they were late. The men arrived at the church and waited for the right moment. Maurice asked Jack to choose. He pointed at two random people. Maurice said the elderly woman wouldn't do, but her granddaughter was perfect. Following the elderly woman and the girl, the men got out of the car but soon lost sight of them. Some guy, thinking they were lost, offered his help. Maurice realized that this chubby guy was exactly what they needed. Maurice said that their car had broken down. The guy, who introduced himself as Haas, was willing to help fix it. Maurice behaved deliberately friendly and immediately gave Haas cash payment. After that, Maurice asked Ryan to start the engine and Haas to get under the car to check the engine. Meanwhile, Maurice was asking Haas if he ate healthy food and if he had any illnesses. Then, leaning over, Maurice fired a shot with a silenced pistol. At that moment, an officer approached the car and asked what was going on. He didn't see the guy under the car. Maurice said they were supposedly looking for a place to build a hotel. When asked why they were following the two women, Maurice assured that nothing of the sort was happening. Eventually, the officer allowed them to leave. Considering the police, Maurice decided they would settle for one specimen. They were met by Imogene. It was now Ryan's turn to do his part of the work. He hesitated for a long time before starting. There were 5 hours left until dinner. Imogene demanded that Ryan prepare the menu as soon as he finished preparing the ingredient. When Ryan, still in shock, went outside, Maurice told the chef that there was a package waiting for him. Maurice prepared large pots for the main course. Standing in the shower, Ryan felt unbearable nausea. After composing himself, he opened the package. It was the fake driver's license in Jack's name. Ryan realized this was his chance to escape. He took only the essentials and got into Jack's car, intending to leave this place forever. However, he was in such a hurry that he didn't notice the gardener in his path and was forced to stop. Maurice approached Ryan and said that if he tried to escape, they would find him anywhere. Ryan must finish cooking the dinner no matter what. While they were towing the broken car back, Ryan asked Maurice how long he had been working for the agency and how he coped with it. Maurice replied that he had been there for 5 years. He treated it as just a job, not trying to analyze deeply. Maurice mentioned Greta, the former chef, whom the agency allowed to leave. She cooked better than anyone. But then she left the agency and became a chef for a wealthy family. Ryan decided to do what was required of him to get it over with as soon as possible. He composed the menu and Imogene was satisfied. While Ryan got to work, Maurice greeted the first guests, a married couple. They were escorted into the house and offered a drink. Ryan continued cooking. When Maurice informed Imogene that the police were at the gate, she told him to let them in. It was Officer Gallo again, and this time he was accompanied by Detective Ruiz. They wanted to talk to Maurice. Imogene said he wasn't available at the moment and that a private closed party was taking place here. The detective explained that they were looking for a missing guy named Haas. Maurice and his English companion were the last to see him. Imogene asked why Haas was considered missing since only 1 day had passed. The detective said that Haas was his nephew. Haas had a little daughter, so he would never leave without notifying anyone. Detective Ruiz intended to wait for Maurice here. Imogene tried to hint that outsiders were not welcome at a private, closed party. The detective wanted to talk to the Englishman. He was surprised that this guy was a chef since Maurice had mentioned something about hotel construction. Ryan calmly replied that cooking was his hobby and his main job was as an architect. The detective started asking leading questions, but Ryan tried his best not to show his nervousness. When the detective showed Ryan a photo of Haas, Ryan said he had never seen this person. The police officers asked about the dish Ryan was cooking. The smell was appetizing but rather unusual. Imogene offered the police officers some soup. They gladly accepted. Taking a moment, Imogene went out to the guests and asked them to introduce themselves as investors if questioned by the police. Officially, they were there to discuss the construction of a future hotel. Officer Gallo and Detective Ruiz enjoyed the soup. It was incredibly delicious. Imogene asked the person she believed to be Jack for a private conversation. He needed to be prepared in advance for the scenario if the police became interested in them. Ryan promised to pull himself together. Imogene personally welcomed the new guests. It was time to serve the first course. Maurice spoke with the police and said he had never seen Haas, but Detective Ruiz was in no hurry to leave. People often go missing spontaneously in these parts. Imogene introduced Detective Ruiz to the pseudo-investors. They all said they hadn't seen Haas and had just arrived that afternoon. The detective sensed something was off about the place, but he had no direct evidence. Unexpectedly, one of the guests invited Detective Ruiz to join them for dinner. He eagerly accepted. Imogene asked the guest for a private conversation. He said that the risk of being exposed heightened the flavor of the dishes. Maurice whispered to Imogene that Jack's friend was waiting for him. It was Alice, who wanted to say hello to Jack. Imogene said there was a business dinner here. When it became clear that Alice wasn't going to leave, Imogene reluctantly let her in and asked the chef to get rid of the unwanted guest as soon as possible. Alice asked Ryan why the woman was calling him Jack. Ryan said he was substituting for Jack, but no one should know about it. When Ryan turned away, Alice tasted the roasted meat and said how delicious it was. Ryan asked her not to taste anything else. Detective Ruiz asked the pseudo-investors about their architectural project. They said that any project was a financial risk, but they were prepared for it. Ryan asked Alice to leave, otherwise she might ruin the most important dinner of his life. When asked where Jack was, Ryan replied that Jack had flown to the UK and would never return. Seeing Jack's watch on Ryan's wrist, Alice realized something was wrong. Ryan explained that Jack had given him the watch before leaving. Ryan and Alice hugged goodbye, and she left. Imogene saw this. Alice felt uneasy and wanted to get out of here as soon as possible, but her car had stalled. Maurice approached her, offering his help. The second course was served. Detective Ruiz was delighted and asked for the chef. Meanwhile, Ryan asked Imogene if he could leave, like Greta once did. Imogene revealed that Greta never actually left, Maurice just thinks she did. In her last dinner, Greta was not the chef but the ingredient. No one can leave the agency. Ryan had to go out to the guests at the detective's request. The guests applauded the chef, saying it was the best dinner of their lives. Ryan announced that the main course was still to come. As Ryan was returning to the kitchen, he ran into Maurice, who said that Alice's car had broken down, so he would drive her to the hotel. The main course was tongue, and Ryan had to do everything upscale. Imogene was not pleased that Alice still hadn't left. Ryan was disappointed to realize that the dish was hopelessly ruined. This meant they had to find a replacement as soon as possible. Alice felt uncomfortable because Maurice was stalling and still hadn't taken her away yet. Learning that Alice was traveling alone and no one knew where she was, Imogene got an idea. When the aperitif was served, the detective received a note from Ryan asking to meet in the restroom. There, Ryan told him that Haas was the main ingredient of the dinner. At first the detective couldn't process what he had heard, then he vomited. To avoid arousing suspicion, Ruiz tried to act as if everything was fine and thanking everyone for the dinner, hurried to leave. The guests wished Ruiz that his nephew would be found soon. In reality, Ruiz followed Ryan to the cold storage room in the basement, where Ryan showed the detective everything. Alice was already lifeless here. Ryan explained that the agency does this all over the world. Only they have the power to stop it. Ruiz wanted to call Officer Gallo but had left his phone in the house. Ryan would have to go back while Ruiz waited in the garden. In the house, Ryan was once again receiving thanks from the guests, who were so impressed with his culinary talents that they wanted to repeat the experience. Everyone was leaving after the dinner. The detective returned to the cold storage room while Ryan discreetly took the detective's phone. Imogene thanked the chef for his good work. Before Ruiz could realize anything, Maurice attacked him, taking his life. When Ryan descended to the cold storage room, he witnessed the gruesome scene. Maurice asked him to get Imogene. They had a long evening ahead. The men disposed of the waste from the dinner preparations. Maurice also wrote a letter to Haas's wife on behalf of Ruiz, claiming that Haas had a mistress in Bogota. Imogene in turn wrote a letter to Ruiz's sister on his behalf. They always do this to cover their tracks. Ryan felt utterly exhausted. The next morning, he joined Maurice and Imogene for breakfast. She said that after last night's dinner, wealthy people from all over the world had booked places for the next year. By the way, Ryan received the remaining £250,000 for his work. Maurice installed a GPS tracker on Ryan so he wouldn't think of escaping. He was allowed to return to London for now, but in a month he would have a job in Africa. Maurice wished Ryan a good flight. As Ryan left, he understood that there was no way back. In the airport bar, a man in a business suit struck up a conversation with him. Ryan said he was heading to London because it's his home now. The man was intrigued. Hearing that Ryan cooked for wealthy people, the man said it sounded like a dream job. Ryan didn't say out loud how things really are. He had stolen Jack's life and paid a very high price for it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.